After severe flooding in central and southern China ruined rice crops, many farmers have been left struggling. Following heavy rainfall in the past half-month, some rice crops began to sprout, meaning they can no longer be harvested. China's National Meteorological Center warned that more rain is expected in central, southern, and southwestern China for the next couple of days, with some anticipated to be more severe. Chen, a farmer in Poyang County, Shangrao City in eastern China's Jiangxi province, told the Chinese language Epoch Times in a phone interview, "Sprouted rice cannot be produced into rice grains. I really want to cry, but my tears are all dried up." Chen and his fellow villagers plant rice, cotton, and sesame. He said that their adult children are migrant workers in major cities, but have been unable to earn enough money due to many factories closing during the CCP virus pandemic. Farmers in Jiangxi typically have two planting seasons, one before May to harvest in July, and another before August to harvest in October. However, the first season's crops were ruined by flooding. But while farmers planted another round of crops hoping to harvest in September, the second harvest season also has been disrupted. Chen said, "A lot of rice fell into the water. Some rice sprouted. The other crops that still stand in the field are wilted. We can't harvest enough rice." Elsewhere, rice crops in Guizhou province also sprouted before farmers could harvest them, a local netizen posted on Chinese web portal NetEase on September 20th. Chen planted cotton and sesame after the floodwaters receded. However, these crops didn't grow well. He added, "Cotton really needs sunshine. Without sunshine, we can't have a good harvest." He said that the disruptions have caused the price of rice and other staple foods to rise sharply, especially pork. Meanwhile, villagers whose homes were destroyed by the flooding haven't received any assistance from the local government. Chen's friends and relatives living in the city are also having a hard time because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chen said, "This year is very tough. My friends who operate porcelain businesses are all in bad shape. At least half the stores in Jingdezhen City were closed." For more than 1,000 years, Jingdezhen has been known for producing China's finest ceramics.
On September the 25th, a report released by Chinese global television network CGTN said that New Zealand and China will upgrade its Free Trade Agreement, FTA, within the framework of the controversial Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Gao Feng, a spokesperson from the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, reportedly announced the news at the virtual China-New Zealand Joint Committee of Trade and Economy meeting on September the 23rd. The upgrade aims to deepen cooperation in infrastructure, agriculture and tourism, Gao said. CGTN reported that New Zealand and China would also maintain communication on research, medicine and vaccine development. New Zealand and China concluded negotiations for the upgraded FTA in November 2019. It is yet to be passed by the New Zealand government and currently is at the stage where submissions from the public are being heard. In 2017, the former New Zealand government signed a Memorandum of Arrangement, MOA, with the Chinese regime to develop a plan for New Zealand to join the BRI within 18 months. The MOA was delayed when the former government lost the election. However, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern noted in a speech in April 2019 that she discussed the Belt and Road Initiative with Li Keqiang, China's premier, during her state visit to the communist nation in 2019. At the same time, David Parker, the Minister for Trade and Export Growth, attended the Belt and Road Forum hosted by CCP leader Xi Jinping in Beijing in April 2019. After attending the conference, Parker said, "The Belt and Road Forum provided a further opportunity for China and New Zealand to discuss possible avenues and opportunities for effective, transparent cooperation under a Belt and Road work plan." The Epoch Times reached out to the New Zealand government but did not receive a response. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo declared in May that the United States would disconnect from any partner that it saw as putting at risk its national interests, including by signing up to the BRI. In an interview on Sky News, Pompeo warned Australia and its Five Eyes allies to look very closely at BRI agreements. Pompeo said,
"Has some cost to it. There's often money loaned at concessional rates or conditions placed in the debt documents or government concessions that have to be made to the Chinese Communist Party in order to get those Belt and Road Initiative projects built. Those present real risk. real risk to the people in that region, real risk to your country, and frankly, they build up the capacity of the
A woman and her husband have been trapped at home for 64 days after she attempted to travel to Beijing and call on authorities to address her grievances. Ordinary Chinese citizens can petition the National Public Complaints and Proposals Administration in Beijing, an agency that hears public complaints. Such petitioning is a tradition that dates back to ancient China, when citizens would travel to the capital and plead with officials of the imperial court as a last resort to seek justice. But Chinese authorities often arrest or harass petitioners, fearing that their public gatherings and protests would disturb the country's social stability. Wang Caixia, a resident in Wuxi City located in coastal China's Jiangsu province, recently told the Chinese language Epoch Times that she and her husband have been unable to leave their home for 64 days, as 4 to 5 local thugs are camped outside her home and preventing them from going outside. Wang suspects that they were hired by the local government. When she called local police for help, they turned a blind eye. Wang said, "I called 110 2 days ago. Police officers came and said this was not illegal detention." She added that her calls to the local police inspector bureau couldn't get through. Moreover, she said, the city and provincial government did not send anyone to check in on her, even after she told them she had taken videos and pictures to show she was being held against her will. Wang said the thugs would not let her or her husband Pan Guoliang outside to buy food or see the doctor. Pan is the sole income earner of the family. 2 months ago on July 26th, Wang was on her way to China's capital Beijing, seeking to petition her case to China's central authorities. Wang alleges that her 2 stores located in Liangxi district in Wuxi were illegally demolished in June 2006. She also alleges that her left knee was disabled after a local hospital in Wuxi gave her fake substandard drugs for treatment. According to Wang, a court in Jiangsu province ruled against her lawsuit, after it heard evidence presented by the hospital that were based on forged medical records. Wang never made it to Beijing. While traveling in the nearby city of Tianjin, Wang was intercepted by trained police officers and Wuxi officials stationed in the Beijing office. Wang was forcibly taken back to her home in Liangxi district, Wuxi. Immediately after, Wang said that local street officials in the local police station hired thugs to stay outside of her home. Wang said, "I heard from local security bureau officials that there was a rather large number of people from Wuxi going to the National Complaints Office in Beijing last year, including many from my district of Liangxi. That's why the local government wants to control me." She believes local authorities are trying to stop her from traveling to Beijing so that she cannot expose local government corruption. Wang also suffers from chronic illnesses, including high blood pressure, heart disease, and pelvic inflammatory disease. 45 days into her house detention, she ran out of medicines for her illnesses. She called the local police and told them that she needed to go outside to buy the life-saving drugs, but a police officer told her he couldn't make a decision without conferring with his supervisor. Eventually, one of the thugs decided to help her buy new drugs every week, according to Wang. Prior to her latest troubles with Chinese authorities, Wang was arrested by local police on March 4th and charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble, according to the Chinese human rights news website Civil Rights and Livelihood Watch. The charge was related to Wang joining other petitioners and signing an open letter to Wuxi's party secretary Huang Qing. Wang posted the letter on Chinese social media. At the time, she was being held for 23 hours before being released, according to CRLW.
Many Chinese businessmen in foreign trade recently complained online that their bank accounts were frozen by police in other cities for unknown reasons. When they tried to unlock their accounts, they were asked to go through complicated procedures and they had to pay penalties. On September 18th, a netizen whose Weibo account name is Factory Owner in the Wind asked a question on his Weibo post. He said that he has a customer in Yiwu City. When he processed a payment from this customer, he found that his bank card was frozen. He wanted to know if this situation also happened to other Yiwu residents. According to the numerous replies to his post, many business owners in China's foreign trade hubs, such as Yiwu, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Quanzhou, experienced the same situation. The frozen assets range from thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a very high percentage were bank cards belonging to China's agricultural bank. These people claimed that their accounts were mostly frozen by police in a city different from their city of residence. Some of the police authorities on their list included Wenshan Police of Henan Province, Lasha City, Inner Mongolia, in the Xinjiang Autonomous Regions, Chongqing City, Lanzhou City, and Yunnan Province. Ren Zhongdao, a researcher at the European Tianjin Political and Economic Think Tank, presumes that the CCP's local governments have run out of money, and they are using this method to directly plunder Chinese citizens' assets.
In the past, the CCP's central authorities will always find an excuse if they wanted to rob private entrepreneurs. For instance, they had used the excuse of eliminating mafia organization and labeled some private entrepreneurs as mafia members. Later, the authorities claimed that some business owners were transferring money out of China, as in the case of Angbang, HNA, and Tomorrow Group. These companies tried to transfer money to other countries via overseas acquisitions. That is to say, the central authorities can always find an excuse to plunder money from private businessmen. This time, the abrupt practice of freezing people's bank accounts is most likely done by local governments.
According to those whose bank accounts were frozen, the time and conditions required to unfreeze differ from one another. Someone's account was unlocked 3 days after being frozen, but was frozen again for half a year. Someone's account was frozen last year, and it remains unknown when the problem can be resolved. Someone was asked to pay 15% of the frozen assets to unlock the account. Some were asked to go to the authority that implemented the freezing to pay a penalty.
In essence, the CCP has come to use this kind of indecent method to block and rob private funds, finding any excuse to freeze a large amount of funds, affecting a large number of individuals.
On September 15th, the General Office of the Central Committee of the CCP issued a document requesting that the United Front strengthen its work on the private sector and that the party committees and governments at all levels shall strengthen the leadership of chambers of commerce on private enterprises. The document clearly states that the target of the United Front is all private enterprises and private businessmen, including the main investors and actual controllers of private enterprises and the main executives who hold shares in private enterprises.
The so-called United Front means that all private companies have to follow the CCP and listen to the CCP. Some private companies may choose to transfer their funds out of China. In this process, it's very likely that the funds of private companies will be frozen by the CCP police.
On September 10th, a foreign trade personnel, Du Yue, pseudonym, in Yiwu City, published a long post on a local forum summarizing 3 points for others based on his own experience, why our accounts were frozen, what to do after freezing, and how to manage foreign trade accounts in the future. Du said that his account had been frozen 7 times and he was summoned by police in another province 4 times. Many netizens whose accounts were frozen said that they had no idea why their accounts were frozen. They only know that many others in the same business circle have experienced the same situation. Some say that they obtained their loans legally, but all of a sudden, their loans were labeled as stolen money, while some others say the reason given to them was telecommunications fraud and gambling. Ren Zhongdao pointed out that the CCP's basic routines for the private sector are raising, setup, and killing. At first, the government encourages these private enterprises to grow, and then they become trapped and constrained in a certain way. After these enterprises are well established, the CCP will start to plunder them. Tang Jingyuan commented that the CCP's blatant robbery of private funds, although it can help people gain some temporary benefits, has essentially destroyed people's minimum trust in government agencies. As a result, more people will think of ways to transfer funds to other countries.
At this year's UN General Assembly, U.S. President Donald Trump severely condemned the CCP and requested that the United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions. Secretary of State Pompeo mentioned in other speeches that the CCP has severely penetrated local governments and other organizations in the United States. The first day of the high-level general debate of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly was on September 22nd. President Trump delivered a speech in video. He talked about the CCP virus pandemic, clearly pointing out that the virus is sweeping the world because the CCP and the WHO misled people by spreading false information, so they must be held accountable.
The Chinese government and the World Health Organization, which is virtually controlled by China, falsely declared that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Later, they falsely said people without symptoms would not spread the disease. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
In his 7-minute speech, Trump named China 12 times. On the 24th, at the United Nations Security Council meeting on post-pandemic global governance issues, Kelly Craft, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, took aim at the CCP directly, arguing that the Chinese Communist Party's alleged cover-up of the origins of the virus transformed a local epidemic into a global pandemic. Unexpectedly, Zhang Jun, the PRC's ambassador to the United Nations, was suddenly furious, saying,
"Enough is enough. You have created enough troubles for the world already."
You know, shame on each of you. I am astonished and I'm disgusted by the content of today's discussion. I'm actually really quite ashamed of this council. Members of the council who took this opportunity to focus on political grudges rather than the critical issue at hand, my goodness.
Some media used "crazy on the spot" and Zhang Jun's performance in the United Nations shocked everyone to describe him. Commentators believe that Zhang Jun's actions exposed the true face of the Chinese Communist regime.
Another reason is that the CCP virus has spread everywhere in the world. The international community's view of the CCP has changed a lot. The CCP was caught off guard, so it started treating other countries the way it treats the Chinese people. So this accident is also showing their true colors.
On September 23rd, U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo also gave a video speech at a virtual event during the high-level week of the 75th UN General Assembly to highlight the continuing importance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He called for the reshaping of the human rights concept based on traditional values.
We must defend unalienable rights today because the International Human Rights Project is in crisis. Authoritarian governments, from China to Iran to Venezuela, are depriving our fellow human beings of their basic rights. Meanwhile, many multinational organizations have lost their way, focusing on partisan policy preferences while failing to defend fundamental rights.
Some analysts pointed out that the CCP has not only controlled the inside of the United Nations, but also extended its influence to other international organizations, such as the WHO and the WTO. According to the United Nations report, among the 17 specialized agencies of the United Nations, the heads of 4 agencies are Chinese, and the total number of Chinese employees reaches 546 at the end of 2018. These representatives have been vigorously promoting the CCP's policies, such as the One Belt, One Road initiative, and defending the CCP's actions. In recent years, Western countries, such as the United States, have begun to examine the CCP's serious penetration into international organizations. The United States has withdrawn from UNESCO and the Human Rights Council one after another, and will withdraw from the World Health Organization next year.
President Trump has made it very clear. We will do whatever is right, even if it's unpopular, because let me tell you what, this is not a popularity contest.
On the 23rd, Pompeo delivered a speech at a rally in Wisconsin. He pointed out that the CCP's embassy and related organizations are different from associations or organizations of other countries.
They're fundamentally different than what the Chinese Communist Party is doing. It has a much more sinister view of this engagement. The party and its proxies aim to make Americans receptive to Beijing's form authoritarianism.
Pompeo believes that the U.S. local governments are a weak link that is easily penetrated by the CCP. He cited that the California State Senate bowed to the CCP pressure and shelved the proposed bill on Falun Gong. Pompeo named the Chinese consulate in New York for being incredibly politically active. A New York City Police Department officer, Baima Dajie Ang Wang, was arrested on federal charges of acting as an illegal agent of the Chinese government. He is accused of providing non-public information about internal operations of the NYPD to Chinese government officials stationed at the consulate and offering them access to senior NYPD officials through invitations to official events, according to federal prosecutors. Pompeo also mentioned the so-called sister city programs and called on local governments to be vigilant and remind each other.
They fall under the authority of something called the Chinese People's Association of Friendship with Foreign Countries. Sounds benign. But that group is part of China's United Front Work Department, the CCP's official overseas propaganda tool.
He also said that right now the State Department is reviewing the activities of two United Front Work Department organizations operating inside the United States. One, the U.S.-China Friendship Association, the other, the China Council for the Promotion of Peaceful Reunification. These organizations include or have apparently attempted to exert influence on groups all across the public sphere, including in our schools, in our business associations, impacting local politics, politicians, media outlets, and Chinese groups here inside the United States.